So let's take a look at the T'au Empire lists that have been topping tournaments, with one strong list for every detachment in the Codex. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking T'au, and in this video I thought it could be interesting to take a look at what good players are having success with on the tournament scene, and what survives the stress test of placing highly at a grand tournament, where you both need a pretty optimised list and also a very good player who truly knows how to play it. Since their Codex release, T'au were initially being hyped up to perhaps be one of the single strongest armies in Warhammer 40k. By the stats though, that doesn't really seem to have been the case, at least partly due to Games Workshop hitting the faction with a few judicious nerfs and a change to the whole Mont'ka rule not so long after the Codex came out. Their tournament win rates are around about 48% currently, so kind of mid-tier, though certainly not bad. They're really quite popular in terms of play rates, with a lot of people using the new Codex to hit the tournament scene, though most of those players haven't been having too much success at actually topping big tournaments, still putting in a fairly respectable 3 big event wins, though it's not really excessive compared with plenty of other more mid-tier factions in the game. Seems like they might well have been one of the strongest armies if Games Workshop hadn't nerfed certain key units like Riptides, Breachers, and Broadsides and taken their Tetras out of commission. But overall, as they've settled in terms of power, it's really not in a bad place for the greater good. They've got 4 detachments that all get played and all have had at least some success, and that's more than you can say for the majority of codexes out there. Out of those detachments, Mont'ka does seem to be easily the most popular, though doesn't seem to be necessarily stronger than Kauyon or Kroot by the stats, and perhaps Retaliation Cadre seems like it's the one that people are having the most trouble winning with, though at least one person has managed to win a grand tournament with it, as we'll see. In terms of internal balance for the army, it does feel like people are gravitating to certain units maybe a bit more than they used to be in the past. Stealth suits are pretty auto-include due to their marking rules and infiltrates. Otherwise, things like Riptides, Devilfish Breachers, Hammerheads, Ghost Kills, and Piranhas all seem to see a lot of play. Maybe Crisis Suits a bit more of a maybe pick. In any case, for this one, I thought we'd just take a look at a few real lists that have done well and see what these talented T'au players out there have been putting on the table to get them their success. Let's start out with Mont'ka, which seems to be the most reasonable place to start given that it's the most popular detachment, and maybe one of the ones that people are most excited for given its fast-moving, hard-hitting T'au. It did seem kind of fun right from the get-go. The detachment rule was tweaked pretty soon post-Codex, so it gives you assault all the time on all your weapons, but only lethal hits if your unit's guided. A bit more fast-moving, but maybe a little bit less hard-hitting than the original rule was, and all of that only applies for battle rounds 1 to 3, so it's all important to get damage in early. It looks like there's been a couple of T'au Grand Tournament wins with Mont'ka. This list by Peyton Priest was used to take first at a Grand Tournament called Branson Brawl, going 5-0 in a 59-player GT. This one's kind of interesting in that it just doubles down on Devilfish Breachers despite the big points increase that they got. Fireblaze Breachers and Devilfish all went up in cost, but this one's still taking 3 of each. 3 Cadre Fireblades, one with Exemplar of Mont'ka. That allows you to get your killing blow in the 4th battle round as well if it matters. They're leading 3 squads of 10 Breachers with their pretty savage Pulse Blasters up close, with a Gun and Guardian drone in the units to keep them a little bit safer, or riding in Devilfish armed with Pulse Carbines. Fish of Fury still seem to be very strong at the moment. To back that up, there's the near mandatory 3 units of 3 stealth suits with a marker drone, shield drone, and fusion blaster. They're in basically every list, re-rolling the ones to hit and wound when they're guiding units, and they have a bit of Kroot support in a Trail Shaper with 1 unit of 12 Farstalkers. That gives you some really quite nice board control, given that you get a perfect knowledge redeploy with the Trail Shaper, so you could put the infiltrate unit up close and then pull it back if it made sense to. That's pretty helpful for screening, or maybe even occasionally to move forward and deal damage potentially, I guess. And even beyond that, they could be an interesting skirmish unit with their reactive move. There's 2 individual Krootox riders that can just be used as kind of placeholder units to screen out things in the backfield, so tough that you do need to at least dedicate a little bit of fire towards them and having a little bit of threat of their own. There's 2 Riptides that can happily fight on the front line with their ion accelerators and fusion blasters, being tough enough to take a punch more than most T'au units, and the ion accelerators in particular really like the lethal hits that Mont'ka can give them. For anti-tank duties, there's 3 Hammerhead gunships, 2 with railguns and 1 with ion cannon. It's pretty nice for them to be able to get around faster with the advance and shoot option. And then 2 individual Piranhas with fusion blaster and missiles. Quite nice skirmish outrider type units with scout. They could certainly alpha strike fairly hard with seeker missiles too, and then just be annoying screening and objective trading units. Overall, definitely a whole load of firepower. Breachers can be massively dangerous on objectives. The Riptides and Hammerheads are good general purpose threats. And it feels like there's enough scout and infiltrate stuff here that could mean that you might be able to pin the enemy army in their own deployment zone turn 1 if you really wanted to. Could be big against certain slow moving foes. For the list it beats, he beats a lot of Imperium things, Blood Angels, Astra Militarum, Adeptus Auroritus, Eldari, and then Dark Angels Ironstorm in the final. Certainly looks like fast moving and hard hitting Tau there. Breaches still certainly seem to be doing the business. Quite a big investment at 100 points per 10 of them, though they still hit really hard. The Pulse Blasters give you 20 shots at 10-inch range, going up to 30 shots with the Fireblade, all hitting on the unusually good Tau ballistic skill of 3+, strength 6, AP 1 and damage 1, and quite lightly guided by stealth suits for +1 to hit and rerolls of 1 to hit and wound. If they can target something on an objective though, they reroll the wound roll full stop. And between all that, you're going to hit just about every hit out there. A bunch of them are auto wound with Mont'ka, loads of them will stack saves given the full wound rerolls, and they'll usually be ignoring cover as well. There's loads of options for amping up their damage further in Mont'ka too. Focus Fire can give you an extra pip of AP, which make them pretty excellent against just about anything in the game. Or even if the foe's still not on an objective, you can still reroll wound rolls with a 1 command point stratagem if they've got out of a Devilfish this turn. They're not really all that sturdy for the cost, even with the -1 to wound of the Guardian drone, but they certainly hit ridiculously hard. Stealth suits are here in just about every list as well. 60 points for 3 of them make them massively auto-include. 60 points for an infiltrator unit is quite good just to start with, but getting a marker drone and the reroll hits and wounds of 1 buff just means that you can't really afford not to take them in an army. They're a unit that most of the other units in the list are dependent on to make their damage good. Not too surprised to see most Tau lists spamming 3 units of 3 of them. Next up, we've got some Battlesuit Heavy Tau with the Retaliation Cadre. This is a detachment that looks like it's maybe a little bit harder to play than most, but looks like a Jason McKenzie has managed to take it to first at a grand tournament, going 5 wins to no losses at Dice Hammer Open 7. I feel like Retaliation Cadre is perhaps a little bit dependent on Crisis Suits being really efficient and effective. It does seem that they're maybe a little bit mid for Tau at the moment, unfortunately. Several lists have managed to run them to good effect like this one, though a lot of armies are choosing to leave them on the shelf as well, kind of a shame for such an iconic unit. I really like the way that this one basically starts with 3 different commanders though, 2 Cold Stars and an Enforcer, and pairs them with one of each of the Crisis Suit variants, 1 Starside, Fire Knife and Sunforge. The Retaliation Cadre is the one that's got lots of support for Battlesuit units. You get +1 strength at 12 inches and an extra AP if you can get all the way within 6 inches, and they do have a few interesting options like a 2CP 3-inch drop stratagem and 1 for jump shoot jump with a Battlesuit unit, both of which are really quite powerful. Out of the Crisis Suit units, I'd guess that the Enforcer goes with the Missile Pod Fire Knife unit. They'll take Missile Pods, Gun and Shield drones, and he takes 3 Missile Pods himself and a Cyclic Ion Blaster. Seems like they're quite a good ranged volume fire type unit with a whole bunch of rerolls built in, and the Enforcer Commander takes that Starflare ignition system to allow him to jump on and off the board. Kind of a cool idea that they could just be repeatedly deep striking around the map, jumping in and then dousing them with missile launcher fire. Then there's 2 fast-moving Cold Star Commanders to go with the Starside and the Sunforge suits. The Sunforge get their twin fusion blasters and the rerolls against tanks and vehicles, the Starside the Flamer and Burst Cannon, and they're nasty against infantry units. I'd guess the commanders are probably leaning into their theme. There's a Cold Star Commander with high output Burst Cannon, Cyclic Ion Blaster, Burst Cannon, and Shield Generator. I guess he's a volume fire pattern going with the Starside, and he has the prototype weapon system for either lethal hits or sustained hits as he chooses. And then the other one gets 2 fusion blasters and a cyclic ion blaster and the internal grenade racks. Lots of up close and personal danger against tanks and vehicles, I guess. Otherwise, for battle suits, there's 2 Riptides with Ion Accelerator and Fusion Blaster, and 2 Ghost Kills with Ion Raker and Fusion Blaster. Lots of nice shots to hand out against elite infantry there, and all of those are quite hard to remove from the table. I guess in theory, the failsafe detonator on a Riptide could potentially be fun, that would have to be in a kind of optimal position. And otherwise in support, there's 10 Kroot Carnivores that can give you some sticky objectives, 1 unit of Pathfinders with rail rifles, plus some nice marker light abilities, a single ethereal on a hover drone that I guess is there as a command point farmer and then can maybe be an action unit later on. 3 units of stealth suits to guide, and 2 individual piranhas to scoot forward and do some scouting and seek a missile bombardment. Looks like over the course of the tournament they beat Astra Militarum, a near identical Retaliation Cadre list, Ultramarines Gladius, Thousand Suns, and Chaos Knights, bringing home a big win for the battle suits. Riptides still seem to be a fairly common including competitive lists, 180 points for a big 14 wound battlesuit with a 2+ save. It's more sturdy than the majority of the T'au army, and while its damage output isn't excessive, it can still hit fairly hard with that ion accelerator. 6 shots at strength 8, AP 3 and damage 4 is particularly nasty against elite infantry, and has a few advantages like ignoring modifiers to hit and shooting when it falls back. Next up, for greater good of a completely different flavour, we've got a Kroot hunting pack list. This was an army by Hagen Rath, using it to take 10th at the enormous German Super Major tournaments. Only a 5-round event, but a huge 400 players. This one going 4 wins, no losses, and 1 draw, though it does look like the draw was a 1-point advantage in their favour, though the tournament was using the WTC rules. Cool to see the Kroot still doing well. Looks like some people are still managing to make the new Birdmen actually perform pretty well on the competitive scene, despite some big points increases since they dropped. The Kroot Carnivores going up to 75 points per squad was a big jump, though a few things were lesser costed than their Codex entry was suggested earlier, things like the Rampagers and the Lone Spears. This one has some fairly godly mid-board control with 2 units of those Farstalkers plus 2 Trail Shapers, basically able to screen out the mid-board from enemy shenanigans and then redeploy exactly where they like when they've seen the enemy army set up. And one of them has Nomadic Hunter for a particularly fast-moving squad, whether it's Carnivores or Farstalkers. There's a Flesh Shaper with the Borthfog Gland for some nicely fighty Carnivores, and a War Shaper with Dart Blow and Tri-Blade with his 3 stratagems and the devastating wounds he can get from root card weapons. I guess they'll be joining some of the 3 units of 10 Kroot Carnivores with the Tangle Bomb launchers, those ones being a particularly good choice to recycle for the 2 command point reinforcements type stratagem. In the Kroot hunting pack, they're pretty durable as well, getting a 5+ invulnerable save at long range, and the hunting pack can give you some good damage boosts with +1 to hit or wounds depending on how injured the enemy are. Then we've got 2 maximal units of 6 Kroot Rampagers, fairly scary and effective volume attacks and putting a whole load of wounds on the table for them. They seem rather excellent for the Hidden Hunter stratagem to prevent them being shot outside of 12 inches. That can be pretty massive when you've got a unit of quite so much threat as them. Just being able to advance up the board with impunity and basically guaranteeing that they get into effective range despite their sort of low movement. With the Farstalkers though, and given that basically everything has scout, most things can be getting well into the midfield straight away. There's one fast-moving unit of 5 Kroot Hounds that could maybe do some secondaries, 3 individual Krootox Riders that could provide a little bit of volume fire support, but probably more importantly do a bit of screening, 2 Lone Spears with the high-threat Hunting Javelins, as fast-moving, tanky lone operatives are usually pretty helpful, but they can also deal some good damage of their own and debuff enemy units against Kroot attacks as well. And then finally, for a little Tau support, there's a Lonely Ethereal on a Hoverdrome once more, rustling up the command points and maybe doing actions or secondaries as needed, and 2 Hammerhead gunships just to make sure that the most important enemy armour can't relax, both of them packing railguns and smart missiles. Looks like the list beat World Eaters, Death Guard, more World Eaters, Genestealer Cult with the draw, and then Eldari. Pretty cool to see the stealthy group being able to hold their own against sheer World Eater aggression and shenanigans of Genestealer Cult and Eldari. It's pretty cool to see the Krootox Rampagers getting some good competitive play here. The young and ferocious Krootox are 110 points per unit of 3. Fairly chunky models individually, with 5 wounds at toughness 6 and a 5+ invulnerable save in this detachment. They are maybe just a little bit slow moving at 7 inches though, even if they can scout. With their attacks in close combat though, they should be at least a fair threat to just about anything in the game. A bunch of volume strength 4 and AP 1 attacks, but lance means they'll at least wound on a 5+, and then a bunch of strength 6, essentially heavy bolter sort of attacks with sustained hits 1 with the Rampager Fist, and a bunch of mortal wounds on the impact hits. At 220 points for a unit of 6, there's definitely a lot of raw muscle here. Finally, for the last of the detachments, it looks like the Kauyon detachment is still a very strong one, and lots of people are still running it competitively. This list, used by Jacob Stojanovic, was used to take 3rd at a tournament called Out of the Furnace. Kauyon's the Index Tau detachment, where you get the massive amount of big sustained hits from round 3 onwards, absolutely apocalyptic damage boost, but coming a bit late in the game. Though as well as that, they have multiple other really big damage dealing stratagems that activate then as well. A bit of transport support, and an interesting return to reserves type mechanic for any of the stealth units. That can be kind of big with getting them at line of sight or threat on their targets, or just getting them around the board to do more actions and things. This list appears to be running as a tag team of Commander Farsight and Commander Shadowsun, the leaders of the Enclaves and the Empire's armies working together for once. Farsight with his 3 battle tactics stratagems, which can use a fair few fun ones in this detachment, and looks like he's running with a unit of Sunforge to make their guns yet more devastating. And Shadowsun just being a pretty great lone operative with a few high power anti-tank shots, also buffing units nearby for rerolls and a chance of command point farming. Beyond that, we've got a single Breacher and Devilfish combo, with a Fireblade leading them with through Unity Devastation, 10 Carnivores for the sticky objectives, 10 Pathfinders for some efficient marking and some pretty nasty ion rifle fire. I guess the Pathfinders could be another option for going the Devilfish if desired, I guess. 3 units of 3 stealth suits to do some efficient marking, and then 6 big suits in the army, 3 ghost kills for that wall of mirrors and a whole load of lone operatives that you can't shoot, packing big firepower, and then 3 Riptides with ion accelerators and smart missiles. Their only loss was to Genius of the Cult round 2, but otherwise they beat Blood Angels, Sons of Sanguinius, Death Guard, Index Chaos Marines, and Necron's Awakened Dynasty to place 3rd. Pretty interesting to see a few different takes in this one. That certainly looks like a pretty mighty firebase with the Ghost Kills and the Riptides. I feel like it's an army where you're probably going to have some pretty significant threat left on the board by the time you get to turn 3. Riptides aren't particularly easy to take down, and Ghost Kills are probably just unlikely to be killed for the first few turns, so they're quite likely to get some big effects from all the damage buffs when they activate. Besides the Sunforged suits, it doesn't look like there's a ton of dedicated anti-tank firepower in the list. They've got a whole ton of stuff that really makes a mess of elite infantry though. Finally, for unit focuses, probably worth mentioning the Ghost Kill. This thing still seems to be a staple, really quite interesting as a lone operative that you can't shoot outside of 12 inches, and even if you're within it, then it still gets stealth, a 2+ save, and 12 wounds. Plus, even beyond that, 2 stealth drones that can cancel the damage of 2 attacks over the course of the game. It definitely goes all in for defense, and not so much on the damage front, though it's still got some threat. 6 shots with a Cyclic Iron Breaker, Strength 8, AP 2, and Damage 3 definitely isn't nothing, plus backing that up maybe with some Fusion Blasters for a bit more anti-tank threat up close. Definitely a frustrating unit to play against, though one that you've only got a limited amount of damage with, so you really need to make sure that it goes to the right places. In any case though, it seems like the town maybe aren't having too bad a time of it right now, kind of well balanced versus the rest of the field, and people having success with literally every single one of their Codex detachments. Will be interesting to see what sort of things people take from here, and whether or not they might get any points or rules adjustments in the upcoming balance pass. Let me know your thoughts on the armies or any other insights that I might have missed. I'm sure there'll be some things that I've either overlooked or got wrong, so feel free to let me know your takes down in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep all the content coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.